okay? And it is about our dear friend Hassan Abi. Allahu Akbar. This streamer thinks I'm wrong about socialism. Let's watch.
Here is T1J. Why aren't there more black socialists? I think that there is a leftist argument against identity politics, or whatever people consider to be identity politics. Okay, those voices were silenced, and if they were white voices, they were silenced. If they were black voices, they were killed. I think that is a genuinely interesting conversation, which plays a central role in this. Why aren't there more black socialists?
Yeah, I mean, Fred Hampton was killed by the FBI in the most literal way. Literally, the FBI fucking killed Fred Hampton. And Fred Hampton is the one person that I could really remember that was a socialist, but also low-key a communist. But yeah, that's another issue.
A video.
A popular Twitch streamer known as Hassan Abi reacted to my last video, and I wanted to take a look at his comments. So I guess I'm reacting to his reaction. Now, I don't normally make videos like this because they're usually associated with...
trying to be shady, but having dreads might be the dirtiest thing ever. Like, how the fuck do you wash these, bro? Like, having dreads might be the most... If you're lazy, please don't have dreads, because they gonna be stinking.
Drama and debate lords and people trying to dunk on each other. This dude doesn't know what the f he's talking about. And I cannot even begin to express how uninterested in that type of thing I am. In fact, the only reason that I even considered making this video is because Hassan's commentary was actually quite thoughtful and interesting. Anyway, let's get on to it. As you might imagine, it would probably be better if you went and watched my last video first. I'll put
fair enough. Sorry, just don't care enough, okay? It's right here too. I'm not watching, bro.
A little thingy up in the corner that you can click on. But I mean, it's your life. Do whatever you want.
True socialism. See? The free market wouldn't tell you that. Free market would not tell you that.
But this whole time in the background, there were these little voices, little hands raising up in the back of the class. Well, if this system is so bad and causes so much inequality, why don't we do a different one? No one really took these voices too seriously, and depending on what era of history it was, saying shit like that could literally be considered treason. But with the advent of the internet and social media, these voices got louder.
I think the main point of this video is that those voices were silenced, and if they were white voices, they were silenced. If they were black voices, they were killed. I don't know, a lot of people, a lot of socialist thinkers, including black socialist and communist thinkers, have seen the environment ripe for radicalization.
Hopefully we try to distinguish the difference between being a communist and being a socialist, okay? Because being a communist is very different, all right? I just want to put it out there.
The revolutionary potential of black people in America, and they were correct. And there is historic precedent for this. But of course, the American government was not too fond of black leftist movements.
Now, early on in the video, Hassan, I think, predicts that I'm going to discuss how it's a lot different to be a black socialist in America than to be a white socialist, because historically black socialist movements have been heavily targeted by the government and among other groups, and black socialists very often risked being killed, if not permanently silenced in other ways. Some of the primary targets of the FBI's illegal COINTELPRO investigations in the 60s and 70s were the Black Panther Party and other black socialist individuals and groups. Through COINTELPRO and other such programs, the FBI directly oversaw the legit murder of black people, including Fred Hampton and Malcolm X. And when you research the history of black socialism in America, it's really hard to find anything after the civil rights era because the government shut it all down. However, I don't actually talk about that in the video. Maybe you could argue that I should have, but I'm not convinced that that is the main reason why there aren't more black socialists. And also, I didn't want to...
Yeah, black people in this country are definitely socialized to be more capitalist and more into the idea of the free market system, you know, because they grow up in the glorification of like rap culture. And rap, there's nothing more socialist, more capitalist than rap culture. There's nothing, you know? And yeah, so that's probably what it is. It's probably culture, how you grew up. Yeah.
Sound sensationalist and dramatic by implying that more black people would be socialists if they weren't afraid of being killed by the government. Like, that's something black people just have to worry about in general, whether or not you are a socialist.
It's immoral and wrong that the top 1/10 of 1% in this country own almost as much wealth as the bottom 90%.
There's debate about just how socialist his actual policy proposals are. Sanders supported large...
They were not. They were, in every sense of the word, trying to bring America into a 21st century social democracy status with robust social safety nets, and that's it. And that is still, I think, a very smart thing to do, and I fully supported him and will forever fully support him.
So yeah, I agree with Hassan here. I think, you know, when Bernie Sanders was running for president, a thing you heard a lot is a common thing people said was like, well, you know, he's not really a socialist. He says he's a socialist. His policies are socialist. So he must not really. Maybe he doesn't understand what socialism is, or maybe he means social democrat instead of democratic socialist. But really, when you think about it for a little bit and when you look into it, that's really an unsophisticated way to think about the whole situation. I think Bernie Sanders was just trying to be practical about what he could get done in this country in this era, like quickly. But also, as I said in the video, this is perfectly consistent with the goals of many democratic socialist groups, including the DSA, where you push forward progressive policies to incrementally move your way towards the socialist system that you want. And if you couldn't tell by my tone, I respect that a lot more than the people who just want to burn everything down and start over. That's just not practical. And
yeah, shout out to Marx, man.
And again, I think it's very unsophisticated. There are real people out there in the world who are struggling, and I think we should do whatever we can to help people, even if it's just a little bit, because people need whatever they can get. People don't have time to wait for your revolution. People still need to eat and still need places to live.
And the revolution is going to be much worse for people who are in those positions, you know, who are in the working class. Sure, the idea is that the working class is going to be the one that's going to bring the revolution, I guess, but even then, you know, it's still going to be a very painful process for the working class. So it's much better to try to achieve any level of socialist values through a democratic way as much as you can, systematically within the system, rather than just, you know, trying to destroy the system all in all. I think that's not good. I think that's going to be kind of spinning the wheel backwards to a certain extent. So I don't agree with that 100%. I think you have to try to change the system within the system, you know. And yeah, to a certain extent, that's what Bernie kind of tried to do. That's what some other socialists are trying to do.
And still need basic necessities.
The core of the question is about, as president, what would you do with the rise of white supremacist violence to protect our communities?
Absolutely. I know I date myself a little bit here, but I actually was at the March on Washington with Dr. King back in 1963.
This man used the "I have a black friend" defense about Martin Luther King Jr. The political...
But it's true.
Okay, so I got a lot of comments about that. First of all, that was mostly a joke. And it is true that Bernie Sanders was active in the civil rights era and marched with Martin Luther King Jr. But the issue and the reason that I use that clip is because Bernie Sanders essentially was implying that part of the reason that he would be a good candidate for black voters is because he marched with Martin Luther King Jr. and was active in the civil rights movement. The two things are not really related. It matters that you did that, but the fact that you did that means nothing compared to whether you're going to be a good president for black people in America. It's unrelated. It is just as unrelated as a person saying, I'm not racist because I have black friends. That's
not necessarily. I think it's unrelated because you're not really answering the question. You're just deflecting and you're saying, oh no, I was actually in the marching with MLK. I also had a dream. Like, come on, like directly answer the question. It's not like he's trying to say, he's just deflecting. Like, what exactly would you do? Like, what are you going to do? You know what I'm saying? But I mean, I didn't watch the full video, so I don't know.
the analogy I was making.
I think that there is a leftist argument against identity politics, or whatever people consider to be identity politics, okay? Because it's pandering and it's bullshit, and most people, I think, recognize it as pandering and bullshit for the most part. So I don't know how to fix that by fixing the communications on it. I don't know how to fix the comms on it, you know what I mean?
So this was kind of just a little aside that he made, but I thought it was a little bit weird. Like, he said multiple times that identity politics is pandering. And don't get me wrong, it is definitely true that the Democratic Party...
Oh God, bro, this is so bad. Fuck me. What is this?
uses identity politics to pander to marginalized groups. There's no question that that is a thing. But saying that it's pandering is not itself an argument against identity politics. That's a completely different thing. I'm not even sure if Hassan is saying that that's bad. It sounds like he's frustrated that people utilize that to pander to people, which is fair. But are you saying that we shouldn't frame policy and discussions about the experiences of different groups? That's kind of what identity politics is. And a lot of socialists do believe that, and that's kind of like what I go on to argue against. So it could just be a simple fundamental disagreement, but saying it's pandering doesn't really address that. Also, and I'm not sure people realize this, but I do believe that most black people understand that they're being pandered to. It's not the ideal situation, obviously, but black people have been able to extract some value out of that pandering. There's no doubt that black socialist groups like the Black Panther Party had a lasting impact on American society and provided value to black people through community programs. But many of the most significant steps forward for civil rights happened due to this democratic pandering. It's silly, but it's true. We got the Civil Rights Act. We got the Voting Rights Act. Well, we had the Voting Rights Act. We've gotten more black representation in government. We got a black Supreme Court justice. Like, we know we're being pandered to, but the Democrats at least pretend to care about racism. And I truly do not want to come off as like going to bat for the Democrats, but I'm trying to give some ideas about why black people continue to support Democrats and continue to give the side eye to socialists.
I disagree with this, and I think other black people disagree with it. They hate when SJWs do SJW shit.
Now, I know Hassan didn't say this himself, but he highlighted a comment from a person in chat who seemed to imply that identity politics amounted to SJWs doing SJW shit, which I think is a really silly way to think about it. To be fair, I can't know what that person thinks SJW shit even is. To some people, any support for social justice in general is SJW shit. I don't think I have ever heard the term SJW used in good faith, but I would argue that keeping the fact that there are marginalized and oppressed groups in America and they all have specific and unique needs, keeping that at the forefront of your mind, I would argue that's a good thing to do. I don't think it's SJW shit, but maybe it is. I don't know.
And this was emphasized because almost every time Bernie Sanders talked about race, he found a way to change the subject.
And they are standing up today saying that we do not want young African Americans.
And that's it. That's what I'm saying. Exactly. I say he's not answering the questions in a direct way. You know, it's true.
To be afraid about walking the streets because they may get beaten up or murdered by police officers.
Right.
But it goes beyond that. If you're looking at that generation today, those young people who are marching, my guess is 25% of them.
This right here is fucking pandering, okay? It is. All right? It really, truly is.
Do not have jobs because we're looking at massive unemployment today.
Yeah.
You're looking at young people who cannot afford to go to college or coming out of school deeply in debt. We're looking at 100 million Americans.
Wait, he didn't avoid it. What the fuck? He literally is saying the plight of the black community goes beyond criminal justice reform, which is absolutely important to address. But beyond that, there are also, he's not switching topics at all.
It is a messaging issue. Like, it's definitely true that black people have more issues to think about than just criminal justice and police brutality. There are
but black people know about these issues because they go through it. You don't have to tell them about these issues. They understand it. What are you going to do to fix these issues? That's the question, right? We understand, right? There's a clear understanding of what the problem is. And, because the problem exists and people go through it every day and people experience it. They don't want you to speak of that to a wider audience. Black people themselves could do it. There are a lot of people in media that happen to be black. You as a politician have a responsibility to significantly, tell us more about what you are going to do. And, that's kind of what it is. In a general way, we understand it. Don't do journalism as a politician. Come on.
Like jobs and the economy and things like that. But in a discussion about racism and racial oppression and police brutality and things like that, that's what we want to hear you talk about. That's what we want to know what you're going to do to solve. When every time we bring up racism,
you're like, bro, you know what? Black people don't even eat dog. It's like, yeah, we know. Sure. But we're asking you, what are you going to do about this other issue? We don't want to know about the general problems black people have. Let's focus on this one issue and how you're going to solve it,
The specific issues of racial oppression in America, you always turn it back to, but the banks and jobs and the economy. It sounds like you're not listening. And Bernie Sanders really did do this all the time. In fact, I didn't talk about this in the original video, but that clip that I mentioned earlier where Bernie Sanders kind of displeases the crowd because he name drops Martin Luther King Jr. The reason he even brought that up is because just before that, someone had asked him a question about what he would do as president to deal with white supremacy. And he responded to that question like this.
First of all, but we have got to make it very clear that the type of demagoguery we are seeing from the Trump administration is not what this country is about. And I will do everything that I can to help lead this country in a direction that ends all forms of discrimination.
The core of the question is about...
She had to repeat the question to him because he didn't answer it. See, here's the thing. We weren't asking you about all forms of discrimination. We were asking you specifically about racism and white supremacy. And Bernie Sanders did that kind of thing a lot. Even after the audience loudly groaned at him, Bernie still found himself unable to just focus on race for 1 second.
I have dedicated my life to the fight against racism and sexism and discrimination of
right, but how are you going to dedicate it farther? Or do you want to dedicate
forms?
Also, there are a lot of comments with people asking why I focused so much on Bernie Sanders in this video that seem to be more generally about socialism. And really the only reason is because Bernie Sanders is a well-known figure who is a socialist that most people have heard of, who I also think exemplifies a lot of the argument that I was making in the video. It was just like a good character to zero in on, in my opinion.
I wish there were better answers in this subject. I wish I had better answers for this, but I'm white. Okay.
Right. True.
I can't speak on this as adequately as I can on other things. I can talk about criminal justice reform, how black people are undermined through systemic racism, all day, okay, till the cows come home.
This might be a catch-22 because it might be innate to the very theory of socialism that these racial issues be sort of put on a second-tier pedestal while we focus on the class solidarity. So really what it's going to have to boil down to is who is right. Am I right in saying that identifying race as its own separate issue that sometimes must be separated from class, if doing that is essential?
I mean, in a capitalist economy, I think that's very difficult to do because racism is part of classism. I don't agree with this idea that the system by itself alone hates black people. You know, institutions hate like that. I don't think so. But because of classism, because of whether it's excluding black people from the system, literally or systematically, I think there's a lot of black people are the biggest victims of classism in this country. And I think racism is one way of that. I don't think racism by its own is the biggest problem black people have. I think classism is the biggest problem that black people have. And in classism, because of classism in America, black people are also under attack, under constant attack. And racism is one. Racism is one weapon to do it. Racism is one weapon to classically attack black people,
Essential to appealing to black people. Is that true? Or is it true that socialists can find a way to convince black people that focusing on class will inevitably benefit them, and that's why they should support socialism? It's gonna come down to a battle of those two ideas, I think. And I can't tell you which one is correct.
Anyway, like I said, there is a breakdown in communication. I personally think that breakdown is partially backed by the media, partially backed by a lot of still very much liberal capitalist black leadership within the Democratic Party's infrastructure. And beyond that, though, I don't know how to break through. And I think part of it is still better representation in this field. People immediately poo-poo identity politics in like leftist circles to a certain degree, but people that come from this background are going to do a much better job of communicating the desires to their own communities.
But I will say that one thing that watching Hassan's reaction did make me think about, that I probably should have thought more about when making my video, is the impact that the media and sort of the history of liberal messaging, the impact that those things have on this conversation. Because I totally buy that the media plays a large role in telling people, this is what black people want, this is what black people support, this is what black people should support. And so, here come the socialists saying, well, maybe you should think about it this way. Maybe if you thought about it a different way from this perspective, you might come to a different conclusion. But it's hard to overcome.
Not just the media, just the people who are moguls in black communities are unbelievable advocates for capitalism. Look at people like Killer Mike, people like Dr. Omar, people like anybody. Most of these people who are who turned into social activists, from rappers to social activists. Look at people like T.I. Look at people like Candace Owens, even from the left and the right. Moguls in black communities are generally, all in all, very capitalist, and they have similar messaging with different with different levels of communicating it. Like if they really sat down and have a real conversation, they agree with how black people could get out of this situation that they're in a general way, and they all agree that the way to do it is by black people being a capitalist by themselves, and that's kind of the messaging, not just by the media, but by everybody that has any level of influence. That's the messaging that's out there for black people to consume. So
decades of the media.
That's why we need more socialist creators that happen to be of color, saying that, well, realistically, you also could look at it from this perspective or from this other perspective. That could be very, I think that could be very good as a community.
Media and democratic messaging framing the conversation about race in a certain way. And I'm always hesitant to be very cynical. The idea that people, black people or any people, are like easily influenced, are gullible, or sheep who just blindly listen to whatever the media says or listen to whatever Joe Biden says. Like, I think that's pretty dangerous messaging, and sometimes it does come off as sounding like that. But it's definitely true that humans are influenced by the media and influenced by politics and politicians, and that our views and the way we think about things are shaped and informed by the things that we see. Like, perhaps I can influence you to check out already a day or done already of those creators platform out the YouTube or any place. If you can get the way for you to stuff. And all of a sudden, the chat became way more positive toward chat. Saw it. I joined the chat, the description to go ahead and sign up. Also, around this point in the video, I joined the chat and sent a comment, and the people in the chat saw it, and all of a sudden the chat became way more positive towards me. When I wasn't there and you look at the chat, it was just a lot of criticism, a lot of, I wouldn't say outright hate. One person said the video was mid, which I thought was funny, but as soon as I joined the chat, there's fucking hearts and shit. It's like, oh, I love the video, T1J. I don't know, I just thought that was funny. At the end of the day, I am in support of anyone who is genuinely trying to make the world better and make life better for human beings. I think a lot of socialists define themselves more in opposition to capitalism than they are like pro.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, socialism kind of is a reaction to capitalism to a certain extent. So yeah, ultimately, yeah. But, you know, I think socialism could 100% help people by design to be in better positions, especially people of color, you know, who have been under constant pressure under this system, not only nationally in this country, but internationally as well. You know, capitalism is very, very exploiting. And yes, I say socialism is a reaction. And you know, yeah, people like me, for example, you know, we're going to be very much so anti-capitalism. And that's the sentiment that we're going to have, right?
Oh, making the world better. This is kind of the great irony, because, you know, a lot of leftists are very antagonistic toward the libs. A lot of them see no possibility of agreement or middle ground with people who aren't socialists. But if in some magical world I go to the polls and I have a choice between let's keep things exactly the way they are or let's try a socialist society, let's give it a try. Maybe it'll make people's lives better. That's the main thing that I'm concerned about. Sure, we can debate about what's the best way to do that, but at the end of the day, I'm interested in speaking with and working with anyone that has ideas about how to make the world a better place. And that's why I think discussions like this are good. And I appreciate Hassan for taking a look at my video. And I hope you enjoyed watching my